Thank you very much. Before I say anything else, I think I must congratulate the Zubeira Institute for what you are doing also beyond the borders of KwaZulu-Natal. We got to know each other because I used to go to some of your meetings and your gatherings. And I always appreciated the manner in which there was insightful but radical discussion. So thank you for that. And I hope that we will see much more of you and forums and platforms like this in the future also here in Johannesburg. I want to start by referring to what Professor Bond said specifically about ideology. And he quoted the quotes that we got here from Amilcar Cabral and from Frantz Fanon about the lack of ideology, and that is one of our biggest challenges. I have seen over a period of time the slow death of ideology in my own party, the African National Congress. And I think it is necessary to say that that slow death of ideology started many years ago. I definitely saw it during the negotiating process. And I saw the kind of compromises that were made by the negotiators of the African National Congress, which I believe to a large extent was due to that lack of ideology. And the lack of radical ideology within the African National Congress and how it was slowly throttled, I believe brought us to the point where we could no longer hear the voice of the people. And where there was the rise of a group of politicians who were actually removed from the people while they still continued to use words and slogans as if they are representing the people. Unfortunately, Comrade Michael from COSATU and from COSAS is not here with us now, because I really want to congratulate and welcome him for what he said about the need to hear the voice of the people and to listen to that voice rather than just to continue with a conversation among ourselves. Comrades, it was here within this hotel that a couple of years ago I had a very interesting meeting with Comrade Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. And we were discussing the campaign that she was going to lead in her charge to become the president of the African National Congress. And a very interesting exchange happened between us. But the essence of that exchange was, if the ANC cannot regain its heart as a party of the poor and for the poor, and cannot develop proper ideological positions with regards to how the issue of black economic empowerment in this country can be addressed in a manner that it will address all the challenges that we have, and especially address the empowerment of the majority of the people in this country, we are faced with a bleak future. And Professor Bond quoted to us that we could have in 2020 our own Tunisia. Now, comrades, that is a huge challenge, but one which we have to be open to listen to the voices of our people. And what are our people telling us? They're telling us that the current policies that we are implementing are not addressing their needs. They are telling us that the poverty levels that they are being plunged into, of South Africa also being one of the most unequal societies in the world, is not sustainable. We don't need big surveys to be able to tell us that. We hear it in the voices of our people. We hear it in the townships. We hear it in the myriad of service delivery protests that are taking place every day. It is not sustainable. How did we get here? How did we develop this path of a lack of ideological understanding and commitment? How did we move away from the basic principles of the national democratic revolution? How did we end up in a situation where the party that should be and ought to be the leader of society is at this stage using the words, the vocabulary, and the plans of big monopoly capital? And yes, of course, in South Africa, big monopoly capital is still in its essence presented by white monopoly capital. But how did we get here? I would say that it is very important, and Patrick wrote an article a short while ago which said the time had come for us to also do a proper analysis of what happened during the negotiations and what also happened in terms of the decisions that were taken under the presidency of President Nelson Mandela. A large part of the problems that we are faced with now, comrades, is because of the decisions that were taken during the negotiating process. And there is no longer time for us to have holy cows. We can no longer say that there are certain people and certain eras in our liberation struggle that cannot be criticized and should not be analyzed with a critical eye. And certainly, there were compromises made during the negotiations and in the presidency of President Nelson Mandela, flowing through President Thabo Mbeki, President Zuma, and where we are now, that have brought us to this point where we are no longer the captains of our own boat. We are not in charge of this economy. We are not in charge of actually taking care of the needs of the people. We are following the instructions of international capital. We've been put in a situation where we are almost on a daily basis facing the gun of the international rating agencies, telling us if you do not do this, if you do not do that, if you do not privatize the SOEs, if you do not break up the SOEs, etc., then there's going to be a downgrading and you'll end up actually in the bucket of the IMF. Now, comrades, are we going to allow this situation to continue? I know it is not an easy question that I'm asking, because, of course, we are faced with very serious economic challenges. We are faced with a potential debt trap and fiscal cliff. We have to be very careful in terms of the decisions that we take. But are we going to be able to take decisions that liberate us from the mistakes of the past, and decisions that will liberate us from being delivered to big international capital telling us what to do? Certainly, my party, the African National Congress, which I love dearly and which I've served for 40 years, has to find back its revolutionary heart. And in the process of finding back that revolutionary heart, it has to go back to the ideological roots of our liberation struggle and the empowerment of the people of this country. If we cannot implement radical economic transformation, if we cannot challenge our financial services industry, if we cannot challenge the evergreen contracts that continue to make the big monopoly capital companies that provide coal and many other products to Eskom and other SOEs, if it has become a situation where our SOEs have to be broken up and privatized because the international community demands it from us, and because local monopoly capital, in the arrogant form of people like Stephen Koseff, can go around and tell us that we better privatize or else, and say to our president, do it. I don't care what you call it, but do it. Otherwise, things are going to go badly wrong for you and for the whole of South Africa. We cannot subject ourselves to this. We have to bring a proper end to it. And it comes back to the input that we have received from our comrade from COSAS. We have to find our roots back in the people. And we have to go back and listen to what our people are saying to us about the poverty, the exploitation, the inequality that they are experiencing on a daily basis. If we fail to do that, and if our ideology cannot bring us to the point where we do that, we are doomed, comrades. We are doomed. We will become a satellite of international monopoly capital. There will be a lack of leadership, and there will be simply a following of those international trends. I was talking to Patrick about a very interesting interview that I watched that Pepe Escobar had with President Lula just shortly before he was released from prison in Brazil. And President Lula said one of the biggest mistakes that we in the Workers' Party in Brazil made was not to understand the international context in which we are operating, and how international monopoly capital was in fact forming, shaping, dictating to us what we had to do. And because we didn't analyze it, and because we didn't use our ideological tools also of internationalism and understanding how international capital operate, we failed to see what was going to be done to us on a national level to become an instrument in the hands of international capital. So, comrades, whatever we do, and I do not have by any means all the ideas and plans of how we must approach our current financial and economic crisis. But whatever we do, please let us not stop listening to our people. Let us not stop understanding our roots. Let us not stop hearing the voices of protest of our people through all the service delivery protest actions. I definitely, and many other comrades, have not participated in this struggle in order to become the puppets on the strings of monopoly capital. I and many of our other comrades have certainly not participated in this struggle to preside over a death of ideology and a lack of leadership. We need to find our own voice. We need to cast that voice into an international environment where we take hands with the international, radical, and progressive communities throughout the world in order to challenge the current financial subjugation and slavery that we are going to be subjected to if we continue across and along this road. I want to conclude, comrades, by saying a few things about my party, the African National Congress. Because whatever we say, this party still continues to be a massive power within our society. How much we want to criticize it, how much we want in a legitimate way to criticize politicians and be negative about politicians, I take it on my shoulders, and many of our fellow ANC comrades and politicians should take it. Many of us, comrades, have failed. We're failing our people, we're failing ourselves, we're failing the ideology on which the African National Congress has been struggling for years. But that in itself can never be the end of where we go with the ANC. The African National Congress still continues to be the major political force in this country. So the question is, how do we find the heart of the ANC back? How do we unite this organization, not on some kind of flimsy understanding that we just must be nice to each other, but on the basis of political principle, and the principle that the ANC must be a party of the people, a pro-poor party, and a party informed by ideology as expressed in the implementation of the second phase of the National Democratic Revolution. Those are the challenges. So, comrades, we got some indicators during the 54th National Conference of the ANC of what the people want. Those indicators were expressed in the resolutions that were democratically adopted by the majority in the ANC. Those resolutions included that we have to expropriate the land without compensation, that we are not going to break up the SOEs, and that we are not going to privatize the SOEs. That we're going to restructure our financial sector in order to be able to address the needs of the majority of the people. And that the Reserve Bank will be fully nationalized. I'm just mentioning a few. Those were the resolutions. I never read in any of the decisions that were taken at the 54th National Conference of the ANC that Eskom will be broken up and that it will be privatized. I never read that there will be privatization of SOEs. And I'm not going to be told by someone else, whoever that person is, that we are going to privatize. And I'm most certainly not going to be told by a member of the board of the SAA that the voices against privatization should be heard, but after they've been heard, they should be silenced. That is the essence of anti-democratic principles in the African National Congress. And we all must resist it to the core. Because ultimately, we have to be led by the decisions of our people, by the majority of the ANC delegates who went to the 54th National Conference and passed pro-radical economic transformation resolutions. There are people, and with this I'm concluding, comrade, because you showed me, I'm sure my 2 minutes are over. There are people who are going around and who say that those who speak like I've just spoken do not care about the unity of the ANC. There are people who go around and call that factionalism. I'm sorry. I cannot agree. Because as a member of the ANC, you've now been a member of the ANC for 40 years and who is a veteran, I understand one thing about my party. And that is the principle of democratic centralism. The majority speaks. And the majority of our people spoke in favor of radical economic transformation. So anyone who wants to tell me that when we speak for RET and for the resolutions of the 54th National Conference, that is factionalism, I say poppycock. If anyone wants to tell me that we should privatize and that we must keep quiet about privatization, we mustn't oppose it because then that is breaking the ANC's unity, I say you talk rubbish. You are not talking democratic centralism, you are talking factionalism. The African National Congress must find its roots, and its roots is in the people. And the final answers to our problems will be when we deliver to ourselves the capability again to have the ears, to have the people of South Africa speaking to us. And they don't tell us privatization. They don't tell us lack of jobs and removing jobs because of privatization. They ask for jobs, they ask for leadership, they ask for a commitment to the principles of the National Democratic Revolution that we fought for, and those of us who were in Kontuwisizwe, many of us died for. So comrades, we have to be principled. We are not going to give up. We are going to resist privatization. We're going to work on the restructuring of SOEs in a manner that they will deliver jobs, that they will get rid of evergreen projects and evergreen contracts, and will empower the people. And anyone who wants to fight us, the fight is on. Thank you.
After this,